welcome back to the Deep Dive. Okay, today we are strapping in for what might be our most ambitious journey yet. We've got this incredible stack of sources, really amazing stuff provided by you, the learner. And it spans everything from like the super technical details of advanced English mastery, right through the whole philosophical debate around career choices, the trade-offs, and then finishes up charting this really complex, constantly shifting landscape of modern relationships. It's a lot. A huge range of knowledge.
It really is a phenomenal collection. And our mission today, well, it's crystal clear. We're going to try and quickly, efficiently pull out the most transformative, the most practical knowledge from all these diverse materials.
Right.
The goal is to help you get this comprehensive insight across these, let's call them 3 major pillars of modern life, language, work, and love. And this is crucial, without that feeling of just being completely overloaded with information. We want high impact knowledge transfer.
Exactly. High impact. We're aiming for those specific aha moments, the things that really click and help you move forward. We've talked before about the kind of intention needed to really master a language.
Yeah.
Well, now let's look at the intentional choices that shape your whole professional life.
Makes sense.
So here's the plan, the structure for today. We're hitting these 3 distinct themes one by one. First up, scaling what we're calling the C1 wall, that big psychological hurdle in advanced English. Second, we'll dissect that fundamental choice, that dichotomy between being an entrepreneur versus traditional employment.
Okay.
And finally, we're decoding the new map, maybe the new language, of relationships in the 21st century. All right, let's dive in. Let's unpack this first section. Okay, let's start with the language stuff. Getting to C1 level in English, that's a huge deal, a really serious achievement. You're officially very good.
Yeah.
But the sources we have really acknowledge this super common feeling, right? This invisible plateau where learners, they want to go from just very good to truly exceptional, that kind of elusive near native flow and sound.
That C1 wall is absolutely real.
Yeah.
It marks that shift, doesn't it? From conscious competence, where, okay, you can build a perfect sentence if you think about it, to unconscious mastery, where the language just flows almost without you having to consciously translate or structure it in your head.
Right, exactly. Less thinking, more doing.
And the guide we're looking at, C1 level tips to help improve your English level, it's designed exactly for that final critical refinement stage. We're not talking basic grammar rules here. This is about dissecting nuance, understanding how the language behaves almost, and pushing past that last psychological barrier. #A, mastering spontaneous conversation.
And the guide jumps right into where most advanced learners seem to stumble. Spontaneous conversation. You can probably recite prepared stuff brilliantly. But what about those messy, unpredictable, real-life chats, where you have to think on your feet, maybe handle some tricky social stuff at the same time?
Precisely. And the core advice isn't just, chat more. It's about practicing realistic, sometimes high-pressure, spontaneous conversations. Think about those high-stakes moments, right?
Like what specifically?
Well, a job interview where they throw you a complete curveball question you didn't prep for, or a debate where you need to whip up a counter-argument right there on the spot, or even a negotiation where just how you phrase something, that subtle nuance, could actually cost you money. It demands huge linguistic agility.
Yeah, agility is a good word for it. And the sources, they had this fantastic dialogue example, didn't they, between Alex and Maria, talking about some ethical issue at work.
The gray area one.
Right. Alex is sort of floating the idea, maybe, bending the truth just a little bit. For the company's short-term gain, classic messy situation, not black and white at all.
And Maria's response is just textbook C1 mastery in action. She doesn't just shut him down, nor does she just agree immediately. She says something like, "That's a tough call."
Yeah, tough call.
And then she adds nuance like, "While I believe deeply in transparency in hyper-competitive markets," some might argue, "positioning information carefully is strategic rather than overtly deceptive." That ability right there to hold 2 conflicting ideas, assign motivations, articulate that complexity without sounding, confused. That's the hallmark of C1 thinking.
And it's the specific phrases they use, isn't it? The advanced phrasing acts like scaffolding for that sophisticated thought. The material points out these key phrases that really help you navigate subtle social dynamics. They make you sound less like a textbook, more human, and crucially more thoughtful, because they signal you get the complexity.
Exactly. Phrases like, that's a tough call, or that's a gray area, they immediately show you recognize it's not simple. And think about the usefulness of, I see where you're coming from.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one.
Rhetorically, it's brilliant. It shows understanding, empathy even, without actually agreeing. It buys you time to think and shape your own nuanced reply. And if you just can't agree, you hit an impasse. The classic, let's agree to disagree. It's diplomatic, it's C1 level, shows you value the relationship over just winning the point right now.
Right.
And finally, that empathetic phrase, if I were in your shoes. It shows real consideration for the other person's situation or constraints.
Okay, so these phrases are great tools, but you can't just sprinkle them in randomly, can you? How do you actually integrate them so they sound natural? The sources suggest something, well, it sounds a bit uncomfortable.
Recording yourself?
Yeah, recording yourself responding to prompts, like high-stakes scenarios, ethical dilemmas, current events, maybe philosophical questions, stuff that makes you think.
And then comes the hard part, the really crucial bit. Listening back to that recording critically, where did you use filler words like or Where did you pause for like a whole second while your brain was catching up or translating? Where could you have slotted in one of those advanced phrases to sound more subtle or clearer or maybe more persuasive?
Yeah, critical listening to yourself is tough.
It is, but you need that objective feedback on your spontaneous speaking patterns. Our own internal assessment is often way off. The sources mention tools like VoiceThread and SpeakPipe, which can help you share those recordings and get external objective feedback. That really speeds up the self-correction process.
Okay, let's shift to vocabulary then. At C1, you already know a ton of words, right? The basic stuff, mid-frequency words, you've got breadth. But now the sources say the real shift has to be towards depth.
Exactly. Depth. Mastering nuance, getting the words to integrate naturally into your speech, understanding the sort of semantic behavior of the words you already kind of know.
So how do you do that? We're ditching the isolated vocab lists, right?
But first strategy, learn words in context and master collocations. Collocations are basically understanding the company words keep. These are the word partnerships that just sound right to native speakers, often without them even knowing why. They're a real signature of fluency.
Like the examples they gave. You have strong coffee,
Not powerful coffee.
Yeah.
Or you suffer a bitter disappointment, not a
sour disappointment.
Right.
Or a strong argument sounds natural, but you wouldn't really say someone is a powerful arguer or being a heavy sleeper, not a strong sleeper.
Yeah.
These little pairings, they make a huge difference in sounding natural.
They really do. The second strategy, also super critical, is mastering connotation. That's the sort of emotional baggage or feeling a word carries beyond its basic dictionary definition.
Right, the feeling it gives off.
Precisely. The source uses the example of cheap versus inexpensive. Technically, they both relate to low cost, right?
Yeah.
But using cheap often implies poor quality or maybe stinginess, a negative feeling, whereas inexpensive suggests good value, more positive. Another great one is slender, which usually sounds positive, attractive, versus skinny, which can often sound negative, maybe implying poor health.
Got it. So context, collocations, connotation. What's the third strategy?
This one taps into cognitive science a bit. Thematic vocabulary clusters. Instead of just having random words floating around in your head, you actively build mental maps, grouping words around a central theme.
Okay, like mind maps for words.
Sort of, yeah. The source gave a really good cluster for business and innovation, which actually ties into our next section quite well. Disruptive innovation, scalable model, market saturation, profit margin, competitive edge.
Okay, I see those words together.
The key isn't just memorizing the list, it's understanding the context and the relationship between them. Take disruptive innovation. You don't just learn the definition. You need to grasp that the source defines it as something that significantly alters or creates a new market.
Right.
And then they link it to a concrete example, like Uber completely changing the taxi and transportation industry. By tying disruptive innovation to Uber in your mind, you create this memory hook. It helps you retrieve the word and use it correctly in context later.
Makes sense. Like connecting scalable, which they defined as able to be expanded efficiently without a huge cost increase, to the example of a software app that suddenly gets millions of users but doesn't crash or need a total rewrite.
Exactly. That contextual understanding is what lets you use these complex terms confidently and naturally. You understand the boundaries, the typical situations where the word fits, hashtag tag check CFE, fluency and pronunciation refinement.
All right, next up, fluency. That quality that makes speech just sound effortless. The sources talk about a brilliant technique for refining fluency, although it sounds pretty challenging.
Shadowing.
Shadowing, yeah. It means listening to authentic English audio. Could be news, a podcast, an audiobook, and then repeating the words either simultaneously or just a fraction of a second behind the speaker, like you're their echo or their shadow.
Okay.
And you're not just repeating the words themselves, you're trying to mimic everything. The speaker's exact pronunciation, their intonation, the sort of melody of their voice, the rhythm, even the pauses they take.
Wow. Okay, that sounds like a serious mental workout.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to bypass your brain's natural tendency to translate, right?
Yeah.
Just pure imitation. Completely. And the sources recommend specific, authentic English materials designed to push advanced learners. Things like the daily podcast from the New York Times for current events. Hardcore History for its incredibly dense, immersive storytelling that's a real challenge. And Freakonomics for its fast-paced, thought-provoking discussions. These aren't simplified for learners. They demand your full focus.
Okay, so intensive shadowing. And what's the main goal? What specific pronunciation hurdles does it help you clear?
It helps tackle those final, really tricky aspects of pronunciation and rhythm. We're talking especially about connected speech.
Connected speech, how words run together.
Exactly. How native speakers naturally blur the boundaries between words and conversation. Like the classic example, what do you want to do? Almost never sounds like four distinct words, does it?
No, it's more like what I want to do.
Right. Being able to recognize and even reproduce those connected forms makes a massive difference, both for understanding fast speech and for sounding more natural yourself.
Makes sense.
Plus, shadowing helps with intonation, that melody and emotion in your voice, which often carries more meaning than the actual words. And also sentence stress, emphasizing the key information in a sentence to guide the listener's understanding.
And there are tools for this too, right? Tech can help.
Oh, definitely. Forvo is great for hearing words pronounced in loads of different accents from around the world, really expands your comprehension. Yug English lets you find YouTube videos where a specific word or phrase is used so you get real context.
Got context again.
And then there are specialized apps like Elsa Speak, which can give you really personalized feedback on your specific pronunciation errors, helps you target those subtle mistakes you might not even notice yourself. #D, mastering subtle grammar and active reading.
Okay, let's circle back to grammar, but specifically grammar used almost like a stylistic tool. At C1, it's not about basic tenses anymore. The sources call it mastering subtle structures, these more complex grammatical forms that let you express really nuanced meaning with precision and, well, sophistication.
Exactly. A prime example they give is using mixed conditionals. These let you talk about hypothetical situations that connect different time frames. It adds real depth to how you express thoughts.
Like the example.
The classic one. If I had taken the job last year, that's a past unreal condition. I would be living in New York now. That's the present result. See how it links an unreal past choice to a current hypothetical reality. It's subtle but powerful.
Yeah, I see that. What else?
Or using inversion for emphasis. That's when you change the typical subject, verb, object, word order to add a bit of drama or formality or just strength to what you're saying.
Oh, like starting with never.
Precisely. The example was, never have I seen such an incredible performance. It just sounds so much more emphatic and sophisticated than the simple version. I have never seen such an incredible performance. It instantly lifts the register of your language.
Okay, I like that one.
And one more. Nominalization. That sounds technical, but it's basically turning verbs or adjectives into nouns. It often makes writing sound more concise and formal.
How does that work?
Instead of saying, they decided to postpone the launch, and this surprised everyone, which is fine. You can make it more efficient. The decision to postpone the launch surprised everyone. See how decided verb became decision? It's common in academic and professional writing to pack more information in smoothly.
Got it. So those are tools for expressing yourself more sophisticatedly. But what about taking information in? Reading. You're probably reading a lot at C1 anyway, but the sources stress needing to diversify, right?
Yeah.
Get into denser stuff.
Absolutely. Push yourself beyond novels or basic news articles. Dive into academic journals, maybe even legal texts, detailed biographies, complex opinion editorials from serious publications.
Why those specifically?
Because that exposure is key to seeing different registers, different styles of formal and complex language used effectively. And it's not just what you read, but how you read it. The sources push for a really active reading strategy. It's more work, but more effective.
Okay, what does active reading involve here?
It's a process. First, skim quickly just to get the main ideas, the gist. Then scan for specific details or answers you might be looking for. Then, crucially, highlight or note down new words, but make sure you define them in the context they appeared in, not just a dictionary definition in isolation.
Right, context again.
And the final step, the one that really cements understanding, try to summarize each paragraph or main section in your own words before you move on. That act of summarizing forces your brain to process and encode the information much more deeply.
That sounds intensive, but probably very effective. Any recommendations for challenging reading material?
Yeah, the sources suggested some great ones. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind by Yuval Noah Harari, really thought-provoking and uses sophisticated language. Articles from The Economist for dense global analysis, and essays from The New Yorker are often highlighted for their high-level literary style and nuanced arguments. #tag, E#, refining writing style and cultural fluency. Okay, moving on to writing. The core advice here sounds simple, but it's actually incredibly tough at this advanced level. Edit. Ruthlessly.
Ruthlessly?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're past basic grammar checks now.
Yeah, mostly. Now it's all about clarity, flow, and making sure every word contributes to the maximum impact.
And how do you achieve that ruthless edit? What techniques?
Several things. Ensuring you have sentence variety, mixing short and long sentences so your writing doesn't sound monotonous or choppy. Being really aware of your tone. Is it appropriately formal or informal for the context? Making sure every paragraph kicks off with a strong topic sentence that clearly signals what's coming.
Okay.
And using strong, varied linking words and phrases, effectively words like consequently, nonetheless, in contrast, furthermore, to guide the reader smoothly through your argument.
The sources had a before and after example, didn't they, to show the difference?
They did, yeah. The basic version was something like, many people think social media is bad. It makes people feel sad. They compare themselves a lot. Functionally okay, gets the point across, but very simplistic.
And the revised C1 version?
Much better. Social media can negatively impact mental health by encouraging constant comparison, which consequently often leads to pervasive feelings of inadequacy and anxiety. See how it's more concise, clearer, uses stronger, more specific vocabulary like pervasive inadequacy? That's the C1 standard for impactful writing.
Definitely packs more punch.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's the really tricky part of fluency, cultural fluency.
Ah, yes, the really elusive bit. This is where you start to sound truly like a native speaker because you understand the cultural shortcuts, the idioms, the sarcasm, the subtext, the jokes that rely on shared cultural understanding.
Idioms are like cultural shorthand, aren't they?
Hmm.
The sources gave a couple of good examples. First one, bite the bullet.
Meaning you force yourself to do something unpleasant but necessary, right? Like, I really didn't want to deal with it, but I had to bite the bullet and finally go to the dentist.
Right. And the second one, very common, especially in business, the ball is in your court.
Yeah, meaning it's now your turn to act or make a decision. The responsibility has shifted to you, like in a negotiation. Okay, I've made my final offer. The ball is in your court now. Mastering these kinds of cultural shortcuts just adds that vital layer of conversational authenticity and speed. #FRIT, the daily C1 routine, putting it all together.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of strategies for conversation, vocabulary, pronunciation, grammar, reading, writing, cultural fluency. To actually make progress, you need structure, right? And consistency. The guide wraps this all up into a suggested daily C1 routine.
Yes, a powerful daily routine, outlining specific time slots and even suggesting tools. It turns all these ideas into a structured kind of language workout plan.
So what does it look like? How does it hit all the skills?
It's designed to touch on all 4 core skills every single day, ideally. The suggested structure is something like 15 minutes dedicated to reading news aloud from good sources like the BBC or The Guardian, focusing on fluency and that connected speech we talked about.
Okay, reading aloud?
Then maybe 10 minutes focused work on your vocabulary notebook, using digital tools like Quizlet or Notion, perhaps, to really drill those thematic clusters and collocations.
Got it. Vocab reinforcement.
Then a solid chunk, maybe 20 minutes, dedicated specifically to shadowing podcasts, using Spotify, Audible, whatever you like, really working on mimicking rhythm and intonation.
Okay. The shadowing practice.
Followed by 15 minutes of writing, maybe journal entries, maybe short opinion piece, and actually using tools like Grammarly or Hemingway to help with that ruthless editing process.
Right, active writing and editing. And finally,
15 dedicated minutes actually speaking English with another person, using language exchange apps like HelloTalk or Tandem, or finding a conversation partner just for that essential spontaneous practice.
wow, okay, that's quite a schedule, but it hits everything.
Exactly. That combination of daily consistency and highly targeted practice across all skills, that's the engine for breaking through the C1 wall. As the source material really emphasizes, fluency isn't just about speaking faster. It's about speaking better, more clearly, more naturally, with greater nuance. It's about taking those small, consistent steps every day towards becoming the best communicator you can be in English.
Okay, let's take that idea, intentional continuous refinement, and apply it now to professional life. We're shifting gears completely here, moving away from language mastery to analyze two really fundamental career paths. Paths that dictate not just what you do from 9 to 5, but pretty much your entire lifestyle, your long-term freedom, even your personal tolerance for risk.
Yeah.
We're talking entrepreneurship versus traditional employment.
Yeah, this choice, whether you make it consciously or just sort of fall into one path, it's truly foundational, isn't it?
Yeah.
The insights from the source guide here feel pretty universal, regardless of what industry you're in. Let's start with definitions, just to be clear.
Good idea.
Entrepreneurship is basically the act of creating, developing, and running a new business from scratch. It's about spotting new opportunities in the market, solving problems in maybe a new way, and crucially, taking on substantial personal and financial risks.
Like the classic example they gave. Someone turning their passion, maybe for specialized baking, into a proper, scalable online business. It's creating something, an asset, a structure where nothing existed before.
Exactly. Whereas traditional employment, that's the flip side. That's working for an established company. The classic 9 to 5 structure where you generally have a set salary, a specific job title, and clear responsibilities within an existing hierarchy.
And the example there was someone choosing that path specifically because it offers things like guaranteed stability, benefits, maybe a structured career ladder. You're essentially working within an existing framework, lending your skills to a bigger picture. Hashtag day 8. Side-by-side comparison, the trade-offs.
Right. And the source material does a fantastic job laying out the core trade-offs in a side-by-side comparison. It's worth slowing down here and really thinking about what these differences mean for daily life and maybe even your long-term psychology. The first and maybe the biggest difference is risk.
Huge difference, yeah.
Entrepreneurship is inherently high risk. You're putting your own money, your time, your reputation on the line for something uncertain. The source stresses success is absolutely not guaranteed, and failure is always a real possibility lurking around the corner.
Whereas traditional employment.
Lower to moderate risk generally. You're not risking your life savings, typically, but your job security isn't absolute either. It can be affected by the broader economy, the company's performance, maybe restructuring within the company. The psychological difference is key here. The entrepreneur often faces this deeply personal internal risk, while the employee might face more systemic external risk.
That difference in risk leads right into income potential, doesn't it?
Directly. For the entrepreneur, the income ceiling is theoretically unlimited, but it's profoundly uncertain. There's potential for a massive payoff if the business takes off and scales successfully. But there's also the very real chance of making zero profit or even losing money for years, especially at the start.
And for the employee.
Income is fixed and highly predictable. That offers huge peace of mind for many people. But it also means there's usually a defined salary ceiling, even with promotions and raises over time. And hitting that ceiling, feeling like you can't earn more in that role, that can become a major frustration, maybe a trigger for people to think about going out on their own.
Makes sense. What about work hours? That's another big one.
Oh, huge divergence. The entrepreneur typically works long, irregular, often quite isolated hours, especially in the beginning. You're nurturing your baby, right? The lines between work and personal life just get completely blurred.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The employee, on the other hand, usually benefits from more structured, defined hours, that typical 9 to 5 rhythm. This generally allows for a much more predictable and theoretically more defendable work-life balance. That predictability is often a non-negotiable value for people who choose the traditional path.
And that predictability ties into stability.
Exactly. The entrepreneur's stability is dynamic. It's directly tied to their business's immediate success, market shifts, customer loyalty. It requires constant vigilance, constant strategy. The employee generally experiences more foundational stability, a steady paycheck, predictable benefits like health insurance, a bit more of a safety net, although, again, they're not totally immune to layoffs if the company hits hard times.
Okay, what about creative freedom? That seems like a major draw for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. The entrepreneur generally has the highest degree of creative freedom. They're the ones calling the shots, controlling the overall vision, setting the rules. They're the architect of the whole thing. The employee naturally has more limited freedom. You're working within the company's existing structure, following established guidelines, maybe adhering to brand standards. You can definitely innovate within your specific role or department, but the ultimate strategic direction usually comes from higher ups.
And the last big trade-off they highlighted was responsibility.
Yeah. For the entrepreneur, basically everything rests on their shoulders. The buck stops with them. From product development and sales to dealing with taxes and legal stuff, it's all encompassing. For the employee, responsibility is typically shared, delegated, and more limited in scope. You focus on your specific area of expertise, not necessarily the survival of the entire company.
Okay, so those are the big structural trade-offs. But the source also dug deeper into things like the required mindset. That seems fundamental.
Absolutely. The entrepreneurial mindset, the source suggests, needs to be visionary, big picture oriented. You have to be inherently okay with taking risks, maybe even thrive on a degree of uncertainty. You're essentially forging a completely new path and constantly adapting to change.
And the employee mindset.
Generally more task-oriented, focused on efficiency, on execution, often on deep specialization within a field. Employees tend to value structure, clear processes, predictability. They excel at navigating and optimizing an existing path. They're like the expert navigators of established systems.
That makes sense. And the idea of ownership, that feels like a core motivator for entrepreneurs.
Probably the most fundamental driver for many. The entrepreneur owns the business, the asset they're creating, and the potential long-term value. The employee is working for the business. They don't typically have that same ownership stake, maybe some stock options, but it's different. And that radically changes things like long-term motivation, investment horizon, even loyalty sometimes.
How do the learning paths differ? Because you're always learning in any job, right?
True, but the way you learn differs dramatically. The entrepreneur is engaged in constant, self-directed, often on-the-fly learning. They have to become a jack of all trades, picking up new skills, accounting, marketing, maybe basic legal knowledge as new challenges pop up unexpectedly. They have to be a self-starter.
Right. Sink or swim learning.
Pretty much. The employee often benefits from more structured learning opportunities provided by the company, formal training programs, mentorship schemes, sometimes tuition reimbursement for further education, clear development paths laid out for them.
Networking, too. Is that different?
Yeah, the focus tends to differ. Entrepreneurs usually need to be heavily outward focused in their networking. Building relationships with potential clients, investors, suppliers, strategic partners, it's essential for growth and even survival. Employees often focus more inwardly on building strong relationships with colleagues, supervisors, mentors within the organization to help them advance up the internal ladder.
And even the physical workplace reflects the difference.
Right. Often, yeah. Entrepreneurs frequently value flexibility, the ability to work from anywhere, a home office, a coffee shop, a co-working space, as long as the work gets done. Employees are usually tied to a specific physical location, the office, the factory, the retail site, often due to needs for collaboration, specialized equipment, security, or just traditional management structures. Hashtag CFI, motivation, exit strategies, and real-life illustration.
What about the core motivation behind choosing one path over the other?
The sources suggest entrepreneurial motivation is often deeply internal. It's fueled by passion for an idea, a strong desire for autonomy, being your own boss, and the intrinsic satisfaction of building something from nothing, something lasting. They're driven to create their own rules, define their own success.
And for the employee, more external drivers?
Primarily, yes. Things like salary, good benefits packages, job security, and clear structured opportunities for career advancement and recognition within that established framework. These external validators are often key motivators.
And thinking long term, their exit strategies must be completely different too.
Diametrically opposed, really. The entrepreneur is typically building an asset, the business itself, with an eventual goal in mind. Maybe it's to sell the company, merge it with a larger one, or scale it up to a point where it can run largely without their day-to-day involvement. They're building something potentially valuable beyond their own time in it.
Whereas the employee's exit is more predictable.
Usually, yeah. Traditional retirement is the classic long-term goal, or maybe resigning to take a better position at another company, or getting promoted up the existing corporate ladder within their current organization. The end point is usually defined within the existing system.
The guide had that little dialogue snapshot, didn't it, between Emma and Liam? That really brought the psychological split to life.
Yeah, that was helpful. Liam, the entrepreneur, he just couldn't imagine having to get approval for every little decision. That creative freedom was everything to him. But Emma, she was perfectly happy in her traditional role. She valued the clear boundaries, the set hours, the stability things that allowed her to have a life and hobbies completely separate from work. And it highlights the main takeaway perfectly. This choice is deeply personal. It's driven by your personality, your priorities, what you value most. Liam's controlled chaos would be Emma's nightmare, and Emma's predictable structure would feel like a cage to Liam.
And it's not always a permanent choice either, right? As Emma pointed out.
Exactly. She mentioned that many people start out as employees, maybe to gain skills, experience, save some capital, and then later decide to take the plunge into entrepreneurship. It's not necessarily a one-time irreversible decision. #D key vocabulary and idioms.
Okay, to really nail down this whole dichotomy, the sources pulled out some key vocabulary. Autonomy, that idea of self-governance, that's like the holy grail for many entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the word venture, it's not just any business, but specifically defined as a business project that involves risk. That uncertainty is baked right into the definition.
And scalability. That's crucial for entrepreneurs who want to grow big, right? The ability to handle more business without costs spiraling or quality dropping.
Critical for ambitious ventures. And in contrast, consistency being steady, reliable. That's often a major reason people choose traditional jobs. That predictable paycheck, the stable environment.
Innovation, too. Creating new ideas, new methods. That's the lifeblood of entrepreneurial success, keeping ahead of the competition.
Definitely. And interestingly, job satisfaction, just being content with your work, that's highlighted as important in both paths. It underscores that fulfillment, not just the money, is something both employees and entrepreneurs are often looking for.
And there were some business idioms, too, that give a flavor of the startup world. Take the plunge.
Meaning to commit, to take that leap of faith, like starting a business, and think outside the box, that constant need for creative, unconventional problem solving.
Also wear many hats. That sounds very startup-y.
Very common in early stage companies, yeah. Means the founder or early employees have to handle many different roles and responsibilities all at once. CEO, marketer, maybe even IT support and janitor.
Yeah, and the phrasal verbs. Set up, just meaning to start something new, like setting up a firm. And scale up, meaning to expand the business, often meaning growing much larger, maybe internationally. These are like the basic verbs of the entrepreneurial journey.
Right.
All right, let's make our final transition. We're taking that same lens, thinking about intentional choice, complex trade-offs, and applying it to maybe the most complex landscape of all, modern love and relationships. The sources emphasize how much things have changed, focusing on words like fluidity, flexibility.
Negotiated roles, too. Moving away from those really rigid, often unfair gender expectations we saw in the past.
And what's the key ingredient needed to navigate this new landscape?
Emotional intelligence seems to be critical. That enhanced ability to really understand, articulate, respond to, and negotiate the emotional realities, both your own and your partner's. It's huge.
And the core values seem different, too.
Yeah, there's a real emphasis now on pursuing individual autonomy within the partnership. It's about keeping your sense of self strong while still being deeply connected and bonded. Plus, just a much wider acceptance of diverse, non-traditional relationship structures than ever before. #A, traditional versus modern perspectives.
So if we look back at traditional perspectives on relationships, what were the key drivers then?
Largely, the sources say it was social and economic necessity. Marriage was often more like a practical contract for survival, for pooling resources, for raising children within a stable unit. Gender roles were incredibly rigid. The male provider, the female homemaker stereotype.
Right.
Courtship rules were often very strict, sometimes requiring family approval even before any romantic feelings developed.
Yeah.
And divorce, highly taboo, carried a massive social stigma.
And the modern shift.
Yeah.
What are the drivers now?
Profound shift. The primary drivers today tend to be emotional compatibility and personal fulfillment, rather than just economic stability or social pressure. We see way more acceptance of couples cohabiting, living together before, or even instead of getting married. Blended families are common, and many people make a conscious choice to delay marriage or even forego it altogether.
And the whole soulmate idea has changed too, hasn't it?
Big time. It's shifted away from passively waiting for some kind of mystical, predestined, perfect match, that destiny concept, towards actively choosing, building, and creating a partnership based on deep compatibility, shared core values, and mutual effort. It reframes love less as a discovery and more as an ongoing act of creation. #B technology and the new digital dynamics.
You really can't talk about modern relationships without getting into the technology's impact, can you? Online dating, social media, it's changed everything.
Fundamentally altered the landscape. Online platforms, dating apps, they've basically dismantled geographical barriers. They broaden connection possibilities immensely, allowing even niche interests or very specific preferences to find potential matches anywhere in the world. It's an unprecedented tool for meeting people.
But it's created its own culture, its own problems, too. The sources talked about the language of digital dating, starting with swipe culture.
Yeah, swipe culture. That refers to the incredibly rapid, high-volume way people evaluate potential partners on dating apps, often based on just a few photos and a tiny bio. Swipe left for no, right for yes.
And the concern is?
The concern raised in the material is that this behavior might be conditioning users to make snap superficial judgments. It potentially raises questions about commitment depth. Are people really looking past the surface? And maybe fosters a sense of objectification rather than genuine human connection.
Then there's ghosting. That sounds unpleasant.
It is. Ghosting is when someone you've been communicating with, maybe even dating, just abruptly vanishes, stops all communication completely without any explanation. No text, no call, just silence.
Wow.
The sources note this lack of closure, this ambiguity, is incredibly unsettling for the person who's been ghosted. It makes it really hard for them to process and move on because they don't know why.
And the really deceptive one, catfishing.
Right. That's creating a completely fake online identity, using someone else's photos, making up a life story purely to deceive someone else. The motives can range from emotional manipulation to outright financial scams. It really highlights the risks of online interactions and the need for a certain level of vigilance.
And there's this idea of the volume problem, right? The sheer number of choices on these apps.
Exactly. The sheer volume of potential partners available at your fingertips can, paradoxically, create this deep sense of disposability. It relates to the paradox of choice idea. More options seem good, but they often lead to decision paralysis and less satisfaction with the choice you eventually make.
How does that apply here?
Well, if there's always another profile just a swipe away, the thinking goes, maybe individuals feel less invested in nurturing a single connection, especially if it gets a bit difficult or requires real effort. Why stick with something imperfect when the illusion of better is always immediately available? It potentially lowers the bar for commitment. #TWC, new relationship vocabulary and structures.
As the norms are shifting, the language we use has to shift too, right? To describe these newer dynamics. The term situationship seems really common now.
Incredibly common. It describes that ambiguous middle ground. It's clearly more than just casual hooking up, but it lacks defined commitment. There's no talk of the future, no clear labels like boyfriend or girlfriend.
And the problem with that is?
While it can feel low pressure initially, it can become a major source of anxiety and confusion if one or both people involved secretly have different expectations about where it's going or where they want it to go. That misalignment can be painful.
Okay. Then we move into non-monogamous structures, which actually seem to require more clarity, not less, like an open relationship.
Exactly. An open relationship is an explicitly agreed upon arrangement. Both partners mutually consent to allow other sexual or sometimes romantic connections outside the primary relationship. The absolute defining factors here are mutual consent, crystal clear communication, and very well-defined boundaries designed to protect the core partnership. Honesty is paramount.
And that's different from polyamory.
Yes, distinct. Polyamory is generally understood as the practice and philosophy of having multiple loving, intimate, committed relationships simultaneously with the full knowledge and consent of absolutely everyone involved. The emphasis here is often deeply on emotional connection and building multiple meaningful partnerships rather than just focusing on sexual freedom, though that can be part of it. These structures demand exceptionally high levels of emotional intelligence, communication skills, and ongoing negotiation. #D, shifting gender roles and egalitarian dynamics.
Another huge shift in modern relationships is moving away from traditional gender roles, right? That old patriarchal model.
Massive and necessary change, yeah. A clear departure from those rigid, historically defined roles and the inherent power imbalances or assumptions of male dominance that often came with them.
So what's the ideal now? The sources talked about an egalitarian dynamic.
Right. Egalitarianism emphasizes deep equality across the board. Roles and responsibilities, everything from who earns money and manages finances to career ambitions, household chores, childcare, emotional labor, all of it is negotiated based on individual skills, interests, time availability, and personal preference, not automatically assigned based on gender. It's about equitable sharing of decisions and effort.
And this connects back to what you said earlier about emotional intelligence being key.
Directly. To achieve a truly egalitarian dynamic, both partners need the ability to genuinely see, understand, and value the other person's perspective, their skills, the burdens they carry. It requires moving away from those ingrained, often outdated, societal scripts about men's work and women's work towards mutual respect and a sense of shared effort in absolutely all domains of life together. It really frames the relationship as a team effort. #tags cross-cultural relationships and challenges.
You have globalization, easier travel, online connections. Cross-cultural relationships seem much more common now, too.
Definitely increased prevalence. And while they can be incredibly enriching, bringing together different perspectives and traditions, the source material is clear. They also present some unique and often intense challenges.
What, language barriers?
That's the obvious one, yeah. Even if both partners speak a common language fluently, there can still be misunderstandings due to subtle nuances, cultural-specific humor that doesn't translate, different communication styles, direct versus indirect, or cultural references that just go over the other person's head. These can easily be misinterpreted as indifference or even rudeness if you're not careful.
Yeah, and beyond language.
Deeper cultural differences can be really challenging too. Navigating fundamentally distinct values, norms, and expectations around core life issues, things like the role of extended family, how you socialize, attitudes towards money, even daily routines and food preferences. These can create friction if not handled with sensitivity.
And the practical stuff must be hard, too.
Oh, the logistics can be massive hurdles. Managing visas and immigration processes, potentially dealing with long periods of long-distance separation, and eventually making that high-stakes decision about where to live, which country becomes the common home base.
So how do couples cope with all that? What's required?
Requires a very high level of what's called intercultural communication competence. That means being able to communicate effectively and respectfully across cultural divides, being highly adaptable, flexible, and genuinely sensitive to differences that might feel completely alien at first. There's also the potential for cultural clash that needs active management.
And sometimes one partner has to adapt more than the other. The idea of assimilation.
Yeah. Assimilation can happen where one partner significantly adapts to the customs, values, and way of life of the other's culture. That's a major personal and psychological adjustment, often involving leaving behind familiar support networks and ways of being. It requires immense resilience and a lot of support from the partner whose culture is being adopted. #tag may have a relationship vocabulary recap.
Okay, let's just quickly recap some of that core relationship vocabulary that helps map out this modern landscape. We mentioned cohabitation.
Simply living together as a couple without being married. Very common now, often seen as a step towards or test for deeper commitment.
Emotional intimacy. That sounds crucial.
It is. It's that deep closeness built on mutual trust, openness, and vulnerability. It's the willingness to be really honest about your inner world, your feelings, fears, dreams, and have your partner receive that honesty with care.
And the flip side, an unhealthy dynamic. Codependency.
Right. That's an unhealthy pattern where one person becomes excessively reliant on their partner, often prioritizing the partner's needs, desires, and emotional stability above their own well-being. It hinders individual growth and autonomy for both people, ultimately.
And finally, compatibility. How has the view of that changed?
The modern view of compatibility, as the sources suggest, isn't really about finding two perfectly fitting puzzle pieces anymore. It's more about the degree to which two people can coexist harmoniously over the long term. This is based on sharing core values and life goals, yes, but also, critically, on their ability to communicate constructively and navigate their inevitable differences and conflicts in a healthy way while still supporting each other's individual growth. It's much more dynamic.
#tag Mary outro. Wow. Okay, that was a massive amount of ground we covered today, wasn't it? We started with the really practical nuts and bolts stuff for C1 English study. Then we dissected those fundamental career path differences, the risk, the freedom, the money, the stability. And we finished up exploring the incredibly complex evolution of modern love with all its challenges and its fascinating new vocabulary.
It really was wide-ranging. But the key overarching message, the thread connecting all three sections, whether we're talking linguistic mastery, professional decision-making, or achieving relational depth seems to be this. The journey towards mastery in any of these areas is all about continuous refinement. It requires intentional choices, and it demands that you pay close attention to the nuances.
You can't just drift through it.
Exactly. You have to actively engage with the material in front of you, whether that material is a podcast about language or the job market, or indeed another human being in a relationship. Passivity just leads to stagnation. You have to be an active participant in your own growth.
And that need for active participation, for intentionality, brings us perfectly to our final provocative thought for you to mull over. It's inspired by a philosophical reflection on relationships from the source material. The quote is, "Relationships are less about finding the right person and more about becoming the right person."
That's powerful. Think about how that idea fundamentally shifts the focus. It moves away from passively searching for some kind of external perfection, the perfect job, the perfect partner, the perfect language course, and puts the emphasis squarely onto the active, sometimes difficult process of your own personal growth, your own cultivation of self-awareness.
Right. It puts the onus on you.
Exactly. So the question to leave you with is, what qualities, what skills, what structures, what level of understanding do you need to actively cultivate within yourself, starting today, to really thrive and succeed in this incredibly dynamic landscape we've discussed, whether that's professional, personal, or linguistic? Where does your own growth need to happen to meet the challenges and seize the opportunities? That's the real growth opportunity inherent in all the choices you make.
Definitely something to chew on there. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today. We'll see you next time. Okay, so if you're anything like me, or, well, most people right now, I bet your digital life feels less like a smooth communication highway and maybe more like this crazy nonstop flood of alerts.
Yeah, it's relentless, isn't it?
Totally. We're juggling emails, the chat apps, texts, DMs. The notifications just never seem to end.
And quantitatively, I mean, just look at the sheer volume. We are communicating more than, well, any generation before us.
But here's the big question, the really crucial one we need to ask. Are we actually getting better at it? Or are we just faster? Maybe even sloppier?
That's exactly where we need to start this deep dive. We've pulled together a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got research on cognitive psychology, guides for professional development, some new stuff on digital sociology, all of it focused on communication strategies for right now, for the modern world.
And our mission today really is to cut through all that noise and give you, the listener, a kind of structured shortcut. We want to help you move from feeling overwhelmed and just constantly reacting to feeling confident, clear, and intentional in all your digital stuff.
It's about getting back some control, isn't it, from the chaos?
Exactly. Taking back the reins.
And we absolutely have to talk about the huge shift, the kind of seismic change that's happened, especially over the last decade or so.
Which is?
It's the expectation, the sheer overwhelming expectation of an instantaneous response. Our sources actually have a name for this.
Oh, yeah. What is it?
They call it the rise of response urgency culture.
Wow. Response urgency culture. That nails it, doesn't it? It perfectly captures that sort of low-grade hum of anxiety that just defines so much of our work and, frankly, our personal lives now.
It really does.
Like you see a message pop up and there's this deep, almost psychological pull to reply right now, within minutes.
Even if that reply is, well, kind of low effort or maybe not even fully thought through.
Right, just to get it off your plate or stop the sender from wondering.
But this constant availability, this always-on thing, it's just not sustainable. The research is clear on that.
It's burning us out.
Yeah, it's eroding our focus, forcing us into this constant multitasking loop. So the immediate challenge, the thing we need to tackle right now for you, is how do you manage that anxiety? How do you set, healthier expectations and get back the focus you need for genuinely good communication, high quality stuff?
Okay, that sets us up perfectly for our first big idea, our first principle, which is really all about shifting gears, moving away from being reactive and rushed to being intentional and focused on high quality exchanges. We need like a proper defense strategy against this digital overload.
And the core concept here, the one that really stood out in the sources, is something called strategic unavailability.
Strategic unavailability. Okay, sounds a bit like an oxymoron.
It does, yeah. And that's kind of why it's powerful. It's the intentional practice, and I stress intentional. It's not about being rude, of setting aside specific times where you pause, being immediately responsive.
Why? What's the goal?
To protect your focus, to protect your mental space. The key word, though, is strategic. It has to be planned.
Okay, I get the principle. It makes sense for SOCUS. But I have to push back a little. What about the real world? Like high-stakes business, client demands.
Sure.
If you've got a major client or, a demanding boss who expects a reply in 10 minutes flat, how do you actually do strategic unavailability without, tanking your reputation?
That's the million-dollar question, right? The practical hurdle, and the sources definitely tackle this directly. They really emphasize that strategic unavailability must go hand in hand with crystal clear expectation management.
Okay. So it's not about just disappearing into the ether.
No, not at all. It's about communicating your schedule proactively. So, for example, if you deal with external clients or stakeholders, maybe your automatic email reply says something like, "To ensure I give your message focused attention, I review and respond to emails at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. daily. If this is a true emergency requiring immediate action, please text the priority line at," something like that.
I see. So you're kind of setting up different service levels. You're still offering an option for real urgency, but you're making the sender actively decide if it is truly urgent.
Exactly. You filter out the everyday, "I need this now" anxiety from the genuine, "the building is on fire" emergencies.
That makes sense. And internally, with your own team.
Internally, the advice is often even stricter. It's about implementing clear, actionable boundaries. And then this is key, communicating them openly to the team.
Like what? Give me an example.
Like, I check my chat messages after my morning deep work session around 11 a.m. Or maybe no work messages pinging me on the main chat channel after 7 p.m. If there's a critical system failure, please call this number.
Got it. The goal is to make these boundaries predictable, part of the team's operating system almost.
Precisely. So it's not just your weird personal preference that everyone else has to guess or stumble over. It becomes part of the culture.
And the underlying why for all this, according to the research, it comes down to efficiency, right? It feels counterintuitive, but being unavailable actually makes you more efficient.
It absolutely does. We think we're being super fast and productive by shooting back instant replies, but that constant context switching, it absolutely murders deep work.
Yeah, you never really get into the zone.
Never. And the sources are really unanimous on this. Constant availability almost always leads to lower quality communication. When you rush a response, what happens?
You make mistakes.
You make mistakes, you introduce ambiguity, maybe your tone is unintentionally abrupt.
Right, which then needs like 3 follow-up messages to clarify.
Exactly. You end up prioritizing the quantity of back and forth over the actual quality of the message itself, which ironically just makes the whole interaction slower and more stressful in the long run.
So strategic unavailability is really about giving your brain the space it needs to craft a message that's concise, complete, and accurate the first time.
Nailed it. Quality over quantity.
Okay, so that shifts the focus from just managing our time to actively managing our focus. But it's not just about external boundaries, is it? We also need to look inward at our own natural rhythms. Which brings us to a concept I found really fascinating: communication metabolism.
Oh yeah, this one's incredibly helpful for understanding why friction happens in digital interactions, especially between different people. Communication metabolism basically defines the sort of innate rate at which someone processes information and then responds to it.
Okay, break that down.
Well, you've got your fast metabolizers. Think of the rapid-fire texters, the people who pride themselves on inbox zero. Maybe they use chat almost like talking in real time, quick back and forth, bang, bang, bang.
I know those people.
Yeah.
Sometimes I am that person.
Right. And then on the other end, you have the slow metabolizers.
Yeah.
These folks might need more time to really digest complex information, or maybe they view communication, especially written stuff, as inherently asynchronous, something that requires careful thought and formulation before hitting send.
So they might not check their email for a few hours because they're deep in a project.
Exactly. They're protecting their focus block.
And I can immediately see where the conflict comes in. Oh boy, if I live this. Okay, so a fast metabolizer pings a slow metabolizer with what they feel is an urgent question.
Yep.
15 minutes go by. Silence. What happens in the fast metabolizer's head?
Total spiral, usually. Are they mad at me? Did I offend them somehow? Are they just blowing me off? They interpret that silence through their own fast-paced lens.
They see it as hostility or deliberate ignoring.
When, in reality, the conflict isn't about malice at all. It's just a pace mismatch. The slow metabolizer wasn't ignoring them. They were probably just finishing the task they were focused on, or maybe they were taking the time needed to craft a thoughtful, detailed reply to the urgent question.
So what's the fix? How do you bridge that gap?
The sources really stress the need for meta-communication. You have to talk about how you communicate, especially in important relationships, work or personal.
So, being proactive, having that conversation before the friction builds up.
Absolutely. Instead of just letting resentment simmer, you could say something like, hey, just so you know, I tend to be a bit of a slow processor, especially with complex questions over email. If I don't reply right away, it really just means I'm thinking it through, not ignoring you. You can usually expect a full answer from me within, say, an hour or two.
That makes so much sense. You're reframing the slow pace. It becomes a feature, I'm thoughtful, not a bug. I'm ignoring you.
Exactly. It's an act of clarity, and it removes so much potential misunderstanding. Think about friendships, too. If your best friend is a super quick texter, and you know you often take half a day to reply.
Yeah. Guilty as charged sometimes.
Right. A simple upfront disclosure like, hey, just letting you know I'm notoriously slow at texting back, but I do see your messages, and I promise I'll get back to you properly tonight.
Yeah.
That can instantly diffuse all that potential anxiety and friction.
It creates a shared understanding, protects the relationship.
Precisely. Yeah. Shared expectations are key.
Okay, that's a great point about self-awareness and setting expectations around pace.
Yeah.
So once we've kind of got our internal rhythm and external boundaries sorted, we still have to deal with the actual platforms themselves. What?
Yeah.
Especially where things like nonverbal cues get lost, or frankly, just weird.
Absolutely. Which brings us neatly into section 2, really mastering the digital mediums. And let's start with the big one. Video calls, Zoom, Teams, you name it.
Ah, yes, the land of Zoom fatigue. We've all felt it.
We really have. And the sources dig into why it's so draining. It's actually much deeper than just, staring at a screen for hours. It's about the intense cognitive load involved in how we're forced to interact.
Okay, let's break down that load. What contributes to it?
Well, first, there's the constant pressure of performance and sort of self-monitoring, because you're typically looking at your own video feed, that little self-view box.
Which is hard not to look at.
It really is. You end up dedicating a surprising amount of your brain power to managing your own image. Is my lighting okay? Is that weird thing in my background distracting? Am I making a funny face?
Yes, the self-consciousness is real.
Totally. And that's compounded by the lack of natural peripheral awareness. In a real physical meeting, your brain is subconsciously tracking everyone in the room, sensing the overall energy, picking up subtle cues.
Right, you just kind of feel the room.
Exactly. But on a screen, you're usually looking at the static grid of faces, all flattened into 2 dimensions. You have to consciously work to process cues that would normally be automatic and subconscious. It's just more work for your brain.
So what can we do about it? Any practical fixes?
One really simple but surprisingly profound tip from the sources: hide your self-view.
Just to turn it off. So you can't see yourself anymore.
Yep. Most platforms allow you to hide it just for yourself. Others can still see you. And apparently, it's a game changer. The second you remove that mirror image, you reclaim a huge chunk of that cognitive load. You stop performing for yourself, you stop worrying about how you look, and you can actually focus fully on the person speaking and the content of the conversation.
Oh, I need to try that. It makes sense. You're removing a major distraction.
Exactly. And tied into this is the idea of intentional presence. This is super important, especially with so many of us working remotely or in hybrid setups.
Define intentional presence. It's more than just showing up on the call.
Much more. It means being as fully engaged through the screen as you would be if you were sitting across the table.
So what does that look like in practice?
Well, it starts with actively minimizing distractions on your end. Closing those 50 browser tabs you have open.
Guilty.
Silencing your phone notifications, making sure your physical environment signals that you're focused. But maybe the most impactful physical adjustment is actually kind of counterintuitive.
Okay, what is it?
It's making eye contact with the camera, not with the faces on your screen.
Ark, I find this one as so hard to do consistently. It feels unnatural, like I'm staring off into space above the person I'm talking to.
I know, it feels weird, but the research backs it up consistently. When you look directly into that little camera lens, the person on the other end experiences it as direct eye contact. They feel genuinely seen and connected to you.
Wow, okay. It bridges that digital gap.
It really does. And intentional presence also means allowing yourself to use natural gestures. Don't just sit there frozen like a statue because you're on camera.
Right. Move your hands if you normally talk with your hands.
Yeah.
Nod. React.
Exactly. Maintain those appropriate emotional responses. It fights against that tendency we sometimes have on video calls to become passive observers rather than active participants. It keeps the energy up.
Okay. Good tips for video. Now, let's pivot to what feels like an even bigger minefield sometimes. Written communication. Email, chat, text messages, where all the nuance of voice and body language just vanishes.
Yeah, this is where word choice becomes absolutely paramount, and it leads us to the art of tone calibration.
Tone calibration. I like that. What does it mean?
It's the conscious, almost surgical adjustment of your language, your word choice, your punctuation, sentence structure, to make sure the emotional content of your message lines up correctly with the functional content.
Because a message can be functionally crystal clear, like send the report.
Right.
But if the tone is off, it can be emotionally disastrous. It can sound demanding or cold or passive-aggressive.
Precisely. And the sources point out how much weight tiny things carry in writing. Punctuation, for example, becomes this huge emotional signal.
Oh, yeah. Like ending every sentence with a period when you usually use exclamation points or nothing.
Oh.
Suddenly you sound angry or curt.
Or sending an email in all CPPS. That's the digital equivalent of shouting, right? We all know that one.
Definitely. Or using way too many exclamation points, which can come across as maybe frantic or even a bit juvenile, depending on the context.
It's all about calibration. And think about how you structure a request. If you need someone to do something, you're essentially choosing between different tonal approaches. Let's go back to that example of asking for a report.
Okay. Option 1, super direct, get this done ASCP.
Okay. Clear, direct, emphasizes urgency, but how might that land?
Potentially stressful, maybe a bit demanding, could create resentment if used all the time.
Could do. Okay, option 2, much softer. When you have a moment, could you please handle this?
Nicer, definitely. Acknowledges the other person's workload, but maybe it downplays the urgency too much. If the task is actually time sensitive, this might not convey that effectively.
Good point. Okay, now option 3. Hey, I know you're swamped, but I'd really appreciate it if you could help me get this report pulled together by end of day. It's actually pretty crucial for the client pitch we have tomorrow morning. Thanks so much for your help.
Ah, okay. That one feels different. It injects some humanity. I know you're busy.
Wow.
It provides the reason why it's urgent, the context. And it includes gratitude. It frames the relationship as collaborative, not just transactional.
Exactly. Now, option 3 takes maybe, 10 extra seconds to type?
Yeah, probably.
But the payoff in terms of team morale, clarity, and avoiding follow-up questions is huge. And this is also where we need to talk about emojis. Even in professional contexts, the sources call it emoji intelligence.
Emoji intelligence, I like that. It's not saying never use emojis at work, is it?
No, not at all. It's about understanding their strategic purpose in written communication.
Which is?
Primarily, the research shows they serve to bridge that tone gap we just talked about. They add back a little bit of that nonverbal nuance that writing strips away.
Okay, give me an example.
If you write, that presentation was hilarious, just flat text, it could easily be read as dry sarcasm, right?
Totally.
But add a single crying, laughing face emoji, and suddenly the positive, genuine intent is crystal clear. It disambiguates the tone.
So the intelligence part is knowing when and how to use them.
Precisely. Knowing the culture of your workplace, knowing your recipient. In a more formal email to a senior leader, maybe one simple smiley face to soften a request or signal warmth is appropriate. In a quick chat with a peer you know well, maybe more are fine.
So the mistake is overdoing it or using them in really high-stakes formal documents where they might seem unprofessional?
Exactly. Think of them like subtle digital nonverbal cues, a quick nod, a small smile. They shouldn't be the main way you communicate the message. It's about reading the room, or, reading the chat history in this case, knowing what's appropriate for that specific context. And that need for really careful tone calibration becomes absolutely critical when things get tense, when you're navigating conflict.
Right, because when there's already friction, that digital medium email, chat, it just seems to pour gasoline on the fire, doesn't it?
It really does. Misunderstandings escalate so much faster because we tend to project our own negative feelings or assumptions onto ambiguous written words. We read between the lines and we often read the worst.
This is why the sources strongly recommend a specific method for handling difficult digital conversations. It's called the HEAR method, H-E-A-R.
Yes, and it's designed specifically as a kind of structured intervention. It forces you to take a cognitive pause between getting that triggering message and firing back an emotional, reactive reply.
Okay, let's break it down. What does each letter stand for?
Right, so H is for halt. Halt your immediate reaction. In the digital world, the keyboard is right there. The reply button is calling to you.
Oh yeah, the urge to strike back instantly when you feel attacked is intense.
It is. So halt means literally, physically, move your hands away from the device. Take a breath. Don't type anything yet.
Okay, step 1, don't react immediately. What's E?
E is for empathize. Try to understand the message from the other person's perspective. Now, this is really hard when you feel wronged or attacked.
Yeah, empathy isn't the first instinct, usually.
Not usually. But you have to make the effort. Why might they be sending this? Are they under immense pressure? Facing a tight deadline? Did something else happen today that's making them frustrated? You have to actively try to remember they're a human being on the other side, not just a block of angry text.
Okay, halt, empathize. What's A?
A is for assess. Assess what's really being said. This means digging a bit deeper than the surface language. Often, an aggressive email about, say, a tiny mistake in a report isn't really about that mistake.
What's it about then?
It could be masking deeper issues, maybe burnout, frustration with a process, feeling undervalued, or stress about something completely unrelated. You need to assess the potential root cause, not just react to the symptom, which is the angry email.
Got it. Look for the underlying issue. And finally, R.
R is for respond thoughtfully, not reactively. This is where you bring the first 3 steps together. Your reply should address the actual issue you assessed, acknowledge their perspective or frustration, that's the empathy piece, and crucially be written with a calm, carefully calibrated tone because you took the time to halt.
Halt, empathize, assess, respond. It sounds simple, but that requires some serious discipline in the heat of the moment.
It requires immense discipline, which is exactly why the sources almost universally recommend adding a cooling off period for anything that feels emotionally charged or high stakes. If you get an email that really gets under your skin, don't reply immediately. Instead, open a blank document, a Word doc, a notepad, whatever. Draft your full, unfiltered, maybe even angry response there. Get all the emotion out of your system onto that private page.
Okay, catharsis, then what?
Then you close that document, you absolutely do not send it, and you wait.
How long?
Depends on the stakes. For medium-level conflicts, maybe wait at least an hour. For really significant, high-stakes disagreements, the advice is often to wait overnight. Sleep on it.
And then review the draft in the morning.
Exactly. When you look at that emotionally charged draft with fresh eyes, maybe after a night's sleep, you will almost always see the parts that are pure reaction, the bits that will escalate things unnecessarily. You can then edit it, cutting out the emotional sting and replacing raw reaction with considered strategy before you actually reply to the person.
The time delay. It's like a secret weapon in digital conflict.
It's probably the single greatest tool we have. It allows the rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, to regain control from the emotional part, the limbic system, which is what hijacks us in those initial moments.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense for conflict.
Right.
But even when things are calm, people just communicate differently, right? Not everyone processes information the same way.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the challenge of adapting to what the sources call communication style diversity.
Okay, communication style diversity. This isn't just about whether someone prefers chat over email, is it? It's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It's about fundamental cognitive approaches to sending and receiving information. For instance, some people are very direct. They want the bottom line, the answer, right up front in the first sentence. Get to the point.
Okay. And others?
Others are more indirect. They need the context first. They want the narrative, the background story, before you get to the main point or the request. It helps them understand the why.
I can see that. What else?
You also have differences in focus. Some people are incredibly detail-focused. They need all the background information, the supporting data, maybe pages of it, to feel comfortable.
I have the footnotes.
They want the footnotes, the appendices, everything. Whereas others are very headline-focused. They just want the key takeaways. Give them 3 bullet points max. That's all they have time or attention for.
Okay, I can definitely see how mismatches there could cause friction. If I'm a headline person and my boss is a detail person.
Right. If you keep sending your detail-focused boss short 3-bullet emails, they might perceive you as being unprepared, superficial, or like you haven't done your homework.
And if it's the other way around. If I'm the headline person getting 1,000-word emails from a detail-focused colleague,
you'll feel completely overwhelmed, buried in what feels like unnecessary information, and you might miss the key point hidden somewhere in paragraph 17.
So how do we manage this diversity? What's the strategy?
It's kind of twofold, according to the research. First, try to be a mirror. As much as possible, adapt your style to match the preferred style of your primary audience, especially if it's someone important, like your boss or a key client.
So if I know my exec likes the context first, I consciously structure my email that way, starting with the background before making the request.
Exactly. You meet them where they are. But the second part is just as important. Be self-aware and clearly, kindly articulate your own needs and preferences.
Okay. So it's okay to say what works best for you.
Absolutely. That kind of transparency is incredibly freeing. Instead of just internally struggling with long email threads that drive you crazy, you could say something like, hey, just to let you know for future reference, I tend to process information best if I get a quick written summary first, and then we can have a chat if needed.
Or, I find I sometimes lose track in really long email chains. Would you be open to jumping on a quick 5-minute call to sync up on this instead?
Perfect. You're stating your preference clearly and proposing a solution. It's not demanding, it's clarifying.
The sources had an example of this, right?
Yeah, a really good one. It involved 2 department heads who were constantly clashing. One was a classic detail-focused writer, sent these massive 1,000-word weekly update emails.
Oh boy.
The other was a super headline-focused manager who just wanted a quick dashboard summary, the key numbers and decisions. They were perpetually frustrated with each other.
So what happened?
Once they actually talked about it and recognized their different styles, they found a compromise. The writer agreed to put a 1-paragraph executive summary with the key decisions clearly bolded right at the very top of the email.
Oh, brilliant.
And then the full detailed report followed below for reference. So the headline manager got exactly what they needed instantly, and the detail writers still felt they had provided the necessary comprehensive background.
And the tension just dissolved.
Pretty much,
Oh.
because both felt heard and got what they needed to function effectively. It just took acknowledging the diversity and finding a practical middle ground.
That's a great example of successful adaptation. And it kind of leads us into section 4, where we look at some of the communication formats that are really defining the modern landscape. Let's start with asynchronous communication, or time-shifted conversations, as you called it.
Right. Asynchronous formats are things like recorded video messages, maybe using tools like Loom or detailed voice notes that can actually replace a meeting, or even just really good collaborative document annotations where people add comments over time.
These seem especially crucial now with remote and globally distributed teams, right? You can't always sync up live.
Exactly. That's a primary benefit. Efficiency and flexibility. People can engage with the information, watch the video, listen to the note, read the comments whenever they are most focused and ready, rather than being forced into a specific meeting slot that might be inconvenient or interrupt their flow.
Yeah, it avoids that whole tyranny of the shared calendar. And presumably it also cuts down on the classic technical glitches of live calls. Sorry, you froze. Can you hear me now?
Definitely eliminates a lot of that friction. But, and this is a big but, these asynchronous formats require a very specific skill set to be effective.
How so? What skills are needed?
Well, because you're not there in real time to answer clarifying questions or read the room, your initial message has to be incredibly concise, yet totally complete. You have to anticipate the potential questions.
So you need to structure it really well.
Extremely well. Think. Start with the clear objective, why am I sending this? Then provide all the necessary context someone would need to understand it. Deliver the core message clearly, and, crucially, finish with a crystal clear call to action or next step.
You mentioned earlier it's like leaving a really good voicemail.
That's the perfect analogy. Nobody wants a rambling 3-minute voice note where the actual point is buried somewhere in the middle.
Right. Get to the point, provide context, say what you need.
Exactly. A good asynchronous message, whether it's video, audio, or text, is tight. It gives all the necessary background, maybe even anticipates 1 or 2 likely follow-up questions and addresses them proactively, and then clearly states what you need the recipient to do next. Please review this draft document and provide your top 3 points of feedback by Friday EOD. Clear, complete, actionable.
Okay, that makes sense. And speaking of providing necessary information, this ties directly into another major challenge you mentioned. The context deficit that plagues so much of our quick, short-burst digital communication.
Oh, the context deficit. This might be the single biggest source of wasted time and frustration in the modern workplace, honestly.
Why do you say that?
Because texts, chat messages, quick emails, they're so easy and fast to just fire off, right? So we often strip away the essential background info. We forget to include the crucial why.
Yeah, I see that literally every day. A colleague slacks me, hey, can you update the Q3 numbers? And that's it, full stop.
Right. And now what happens?
Now I have to stop what I'm doing, mentally switch gears, and type back, sure, which numbers specifically, for which report, what's the deadline? Is this for internal review or a client presentation?
Exactly. All that back and forth, those clarification cycles, it just lost productivity and mounting frustration on both sides.
So what's the solution? It seems obvious, but maybe it's not.
The solution is remarkably simple, but it requires conscious effort, intentionality. Always include the why and the by when. Provide the context.
So instead of just, can you send me that report?
You say, hey, could you please send me the final version of the Q3 regional sales report? I need it by 2 p.m. today because I have to pull some key numbers for the executive budget review meeting this afternoon. I'll need about 2 minutes to format it once I have it. Thanks.
Okay, that's maybe one extra sentence, but the difference is huge.
It's massive. That small shift, just adding the purpose and the deadline, immediately shows respect for the other person's time and priorities. It eliminates those pointless clarification loops, and honestly, it speeds up the entire workflow for everyone. Less friction, faster results.
Context is king, basically.
Context is absolutely king in digital communication. And another really interesting concept related to preserving clarity and context over time is something the sources call communication archaeology.
Communication archaeology. I love that term. Like digging through old digital ruins. What does it mean practically?
It's the intentional practice of making decisions, discussions, and their rationales traceable and easily accessible long after they happen. Imagine a complex project that goes off the rails 3 months in. If the history of that project is scattered across 800 Slack messages in various channels, 20 different email chains, and maybe some notes from 3 separate meetings, how do you figure out why a critical decision was made way back when? It's nearly impossible.
Yeah, you'd spend days just trying to piece it together. It's digital detective work.
Exactly. So communication archaeology is about building the archive as you go. It means, for instance, at the end of a key discussion, whether it was in chat or a meeting, someone takes responsibility for summarizing the main decisions made and the reasons why.
And then what do you do with that summary?
You put it somewhere central and searchable. Maybe you paste it into a dedicated project decisions document, or pin a summary message in the main project chat channel, or ensure clear, concise meeting minutes with action items and rationales are uploaded to a shared drive.
So, using searchable keywords, maybe having a dedicated wiki or knowledge base, it's about creating a reference library of rationale, not just a massive disorganized archive of messages.
Yeah. Precisely. A library of rationale. And think how valuable that is, especially in organizations that are growing fast or have some turnover. A new team member can quickly get up to speed by reviewing the decision logs for a project.
Right, without having to interrupt 10 different senior people to ask, hey, why did we choose option A instead of option B 6 months ago?
Exactly. It promotes transparency, preserves institutional knowledge, and prevents constantly relitigating old decisions because the why is clearly documented.
Okay, that's super practical. Now, staying within this modern landscape, there's another layer of complexity. Different generations often come into the workplace with pretty different default communication styles and preferences. We need to talk about generational bridging.
Absolutely. This is a real factor. The research identifies some fairly strong tendencies that we need to be careful not to stereotype.
Okay, so what are some of those tendencies?
Well, generally speaking, you might find Gen Z often prefers really rapid-fire visual communication, direct messaging platforms like Slack or Teams, sometimes even voice notes. They tend to value speed and a sense of authenticity.
Okay. What about older generations?
Gen X, having come up professionally with email, often defaults to the structure and relative formality of email for anything important. And boomers might still prefer the immediacy and perceived finality of a scheduled phone call for significant discussions.
And I can immediately see the potential clash. Imagine a Gen Z intern sending a quick 45-second voice note update to a boomer executive.
Big friction point, potentially. The executive might perceive the voice note as unprofessional, maybe even lazy. Why didn't they type this out formally?
While the intern probably thought sending a formal email for a quick update was incredibly slow, inefficient, and maybe even overly stiff.
Exactly. Both are operating from their ingrained norms and preferences.
So how do we bridge this? The sources cautioned against rigid rules based on age, right?
Absolutely. Treat these as tendencies, not definitive rules. People are individuals. The absolute key here is flexibility and, again, that active inquiry. Don't assume based on someone's age.
Just ask them.
Just ask. It's the simplest and most effective approach. Hey, what's generally the best way to reach you for different types of things? Like, what do you prefer for urgent questions versus longer updates?
Makes sense. Take the guesswork out of it.
And one really effective strategy highlighted in the sources was a multi-generational team that actually created a simple communication menu or charter for themselves.
A communication menu, what did that look like?
They didn't assume anything. They sat down and explicitly listed out. Okay, for genuine crises needing immediate attention, use text or phone call. For high-detail, non-urgent summaries or proposals, use email. For quick questions or approvals where an instant reply isn't critical, use our team chat.
So they defined the channel for the purpose.
Exactly. It removed all the ambiguity and potential judgment. Everyone knew the agreed-upon norms for the team, regardless of their personal default preference. It allowed everyone to communicate effectively and respectfully within that shared framework.
Okay, this is all incredibly useful stuff about boundaries, pace, mediums, context. But as we move into our final section, it feels like we need to circle back to the absolute core of it all, which is the human element, right?
Absolutely. All these techniques and strategies are, well, ultimately pretty useless if we forget that communication is fundamentally a two-way street. It relies just as much on listening and empathy as it does on sending clear messages.
And listening in the digital world, man, it feels exponentially harder sometimes.
It really is. Think about how listening changes when all those natural subconscious cues just disappear. You don't have body language to read in an email. You often get delayed, fragmented responses in chat that make it hard to gauge reaction.
And during video calls, let's be honest, the potential for our minds to wander or to be secretly multitasking, it's high.
It's very high. So digital listening requires a much more conscious, active effort.
What does that active effort look like? How do we show we're listening digitally?
Well, we need to move beyond just simple passive acknowledgments. The quick okay or the thumbs up emoji or got it.
Why aren't those enough? They show you receive the message.
They show reception, yes, but they don't confirm comprehension. Passive acknowledgments only signal message received. They don't signal message understood correctly.
Okay. So you need to aim for active confirmation instead.
Exactly. Active confirmation demonstrates that you've actually processed the information and checked your understanding.
So give me an example. Instead of just replying, got it, to a request.
You might reply, okay, just to make sure I've got this right. You need the final Q3 data segmented by region, and you need it delivered as an Excel file by the end of the day, Friday. Is that correct?
I see. You're restating the key points in your own words.
Yes. That simple act forces you, the listener, to fully process the information. And crucially, it gives the sender an immediate chance to catch any misunderstanding before it leads to wasted work or a mistake down the line.
It's like a quick quality check on understanding, an investment in accuracy.
Precisely. It saves time and prevents errors in the long run.
And this active effort, this need for conscious engagement, it doesn't just apply to work emails, does it? It extends to how we interact in more public digital forums too, like social media.
Oh, definitely. The sources talk quite a bit about the value of constructive engagement, especially online.
What does that mean?
It starts with recognizing that pretty much every interaction we have online, whether it's a comment on LinkedIn, a reply on Twitter, a post on Facebook, contributes to our public persona, our digital footprint. We need to be mindful of those public-private boundaries.
And the goal shouldn't just be to vent or react.
Ideally, no. The goal in those public or semi-public spaces should be to try and add value, share a thoughtful perspective, or foster understanding, rather than just firing off an emotional reaction or trying to win an argument.
Yeah, scoring points online rarely achieves much.
Rarely. And the sources offered a really practical dialogue strategy for when you encounter a post that's maybe controversial or factually incorrect or just plain frustrating.
Okay, what's the strategy? Instead of jumping in with, you're wrong.
Exactly. Instead of that confrontational, often unproductive approach like, you're totally wrong and here are 5 reasons why. Try shifting the language to something more like inquiry.
Like what?
Like, that's an interesting take. I was looking at some data recently that suggested a different angle. Have you considered? Or, I see where you're coming from, but I wonder if this other perspective might also be relevant.
Okay. You're shifting from accusation to invitation, from you're wrong to have you thought about this?
Precisely. That small but significant shift does a few things. It opens the door for actual dialogue rather than slamming it shut. It shows respect for the other person, even if you disagree strongly. And frankly, it makes you look much more measured and thoughtful on your permanent digital record.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about playing the long game online, not just the immediate reaction.
Definitely. And ultimately, all of these practices we discussed, the tone calibration, the intentional presence on video, the active confirmation and listening, the constructive engagement online, they all point towards one vital foundational goal.
Which is?
Cultivating digital empathy.
Digital empathy. Okay. Tell me more about that.
It's the absolute core principle that needs to underpin how we use all this technology. It's about consciously working to maintain that human connection despite the digital barriers. And the simplest way to do that is to constantly remember there's a real person with their own context on the other end of every single interaction.
Remembering they have their own deadlines, their own communication metabolism we talked about, their own stresses and pressures outside of this one message.
Exactly. They're not just a username or an email address, they're a whole person.
And how do we actively cultivate that empathy beyond just remembering?
One key way is to deliberately incorporate non-task communication into our digital interactions. This is like the digital replacement for those spontaneous water cooler chats or quick hallway conversations we used to have more often.
So taking 30 seconds at the start of a chat or email to ask about someone's weekend, or celebrating a small win you saw they had.
Yes, or even just asking sometimes, hey, how are you really doing today? Those small moments of human check-in ground the relationship in something more than just tasks and transactions. They build rapport and trust.
That feels really important, especially in remote settings where those casual interactions don't happen automatically.
Critically important. And the other huge piece of digital empathy, perhaps the most crucial one, is actively choosing to exercise the generous interpretation.
The generous interpretation. What does that mean?
It means when you receive a message that seems short or abrupt, or maybe even cold, like that classic one-word email reply, okay, you make a conscious choice not to default to assuming negative intent.
So don't immediately jump to, wow, they're being rude, or they must be mad at me.
Exactly. Instead, assume positive or, at worst, neutral intent. Assume they're incredibly busy. Assume they're rushing between meetings. Assume they're dealing with a personal crisis you don't know about. Assume they just typed it quickly on their phone. Choose the most generous possible reason for the brevity or perceived lack of warmth.
That feels like a decision you make almost for your own mental health, not just for theirs.
It absolutely is. It stops you from spinning out into that anxiety spiral that response urgency culture feeds on. It prevents you from wasting energy misinterpreting tone.
And it allows you to just respond to the actual substance of the message, not the tone you think you perceived.
Precisely. Respond to the content, not the perceived attitude. Assume the best until proven otherwise. It's a cornerstone of digital empathy. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground today, from, the absolute necessity of setting those strategic boundaries to navigating the tricky nuances of tone and writing and presence on video, the importance of providing context, adapting to different styles.
And the fundamentals of listening and empathy.
Right. It really feels like the core message weaving through all of this is that effective digital communication isn't really about mastering the newest app or gadget.
No, not at all.
It's about being intentional. It's about being clear, empathetic, and focusing on the quality of the connection, not just the quantity of messages flying back and forth.
Absolutely. And there was this final thought, a kind of synthesis from several sources that really struck me as powerful.
Oh, yeah. What was it?
It's this idea, in a world where technology makes instant communication theoretically possible with almost anyone, anywhere, at any time, the true scarcity, the most valuable commodity, becomes our attention. The quality of the attention we choose to give becomes the most meaningful gift we can offer another person in a digital context.
Wow. That really reframes everything, doesn't it? Every message we choose to send, every notification we choose to ignore or engage with, it shifts the focus from just managing the sheer volume to managing the value of our attention.
Precisely.
So for you, our listener, listening in right now, here's our challenge for you this week, based on everything we've talked about.
Yeah, take just one thing.
Just pick one specific aspect that resonated with you today. Maybe it's finally setting that strategic unavailability boundary, like deciding you will only check email twice a day.
Or maybe it's consciously practicing that generous interpretation rule the next time you get a super short, abrupt text message.
Or maybe it's committing to always adding the why, that little piece of context, whenever you make a request via chat or email this week.
Just pick one small, intentional shift and commit to trying it out.
And then just observe. See what happens. Notice how it might reduce a little bit of your own stress, maybe minimize some friction in your work or personal life, perhaps even deepen the quality of one interaction.
Start small, but start somewhere.
Because ultimately, as all these sources suggest, learning to communicate better in this digital age isn't just about efficiency. It leads to deeper connections, less anxiety, and genuinely more understanding and meaning in all parts of our lives.
Well said.
Thank you so much for diving deep with us today on this.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Until next time, try to communicate mindfully, everyone, not just frantically.